They thought she was just another woman they could mock in court. But when she stood up and revealed who she truly was, the entire courtroom went silent. The story begins in a small, crowded courtroom that smelled faintly of old wood and heavy air. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their cold glow across tired faces waiting for their turn in front of the judge. On the left side of the room, 3 men from the HOA sat stiffly in their suits. Their leader, Mr. Callahan, wore a smug grin that seemed permanently carved into his face. His arms were folded, his eyes locked on the woman standing alone at the defense table. She was quiet, composed, dressed simply in a dark blazer. Her name was Maya. To anyone watching, she looked like an ordinary homeowner who had simply gotten on the wrong side of her neighborhood's HOA. But this wasn't ordinary. This was a battle that had been building for months. The HOA claimed Maya had violated nearly every rule in their book. Grass too long, car parked in the wrong place, mailbox painted the wrong shade of black. It was the kind of harassment that homeowners whispered about but rarely fought back against. Most people caved, paid the fines, kept their heads down. Not Maya. She sat quietly as the men across the room chuckled, whispering to each other, their laughter echoing faintly through the room. One of them leaned toward the other and muttered just loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Till the judge sees she has no lawyer." "This'll be quick." The laughter grew, and Maya simply lifted her chin. Her silence was louder than their words. The judge entered, slamming the gavel down. "Court is in session. Let's hear the case." Callahan rose immediately, eager to get the floor. His voice dripped with arrogance. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter. The defendant has refused to comply with community standards. She has ignored fines, disregarded notices, and shown blatant disrespect for this association. We are simply here to enforce order and fairness for all residents." He turned, gesturing dramatically toward Maya as though she were a criminal. "She thinks the rules don't apply to her. And frankly, we can't let that happen. We recommend maximum fines and legal fees to send a message." He sat down, satisfied, his smirk widening. The judge nodded slowly, then looked at Maya. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" For a moment she didn't move. The room was heavy with silence. Some thought she was frozen. Some thought she was scared. The HOA men certainly thought they had already won. Then Maya stood. She looked directly at the judge, her voice calm but firm. "Yes, Your Honor, I do have something to say." The HOA men chuckled again, as if her words meant nothing, but Maya's eyes sharpened. She pulled a small folder from her bag and placed it carefully on the table. She opened it, slowly, deliberately, each page making a quiet slap as it hit the wood. And then she began to speak. First, she said, "I'd like to remind everyone that homeowners associations are not above the law. They cannot invent rules outside their charter. They cannot impose fines that have no legal basis. And they cannot target one homeowner unfairly while ignoring others." The men shifted. Uncomfortably, she flipped to another page. "Second, these supposed violations, grass length, mailbox paint, car parking. Your own bylaws state that homeowners must be given written notice and reasonable time to comply. Yet here she lifted a letter high. I was fined within 24 hours, without chance to respond." The judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised, and still, Maya's voice grew steadier. "Third, selective enforcement. I have photographs of other homes with the same mailbox color, the same grass height, even cars parked overnight on the street. Not one of those homeowners has received fines. This HOA has singled me out." The laughter stopped. The men were no longer smirking, but Maya wasn't done. Her voice carried a weight that was beginning to crush the room, and finally she said, "Closing the folder, I want to be clear. I'm not just here as a homeowner defending myself. I'm here because I've seen how this HOA abuses its power. I've seen how they silence people who don't fit their mold. But I will not be silenced." The judge studied her for a long moment. The men at the HOA table shifted nervously, whispering, fidgeting, their arrogance crumbling. And then, with quiet force, Maya added, "You thought I was just another woman you could push around. You laughed. You mocked me. But you should know one thing. Her pause cut through the room like a blade. "I run Homeland Security." The courtroom froze. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not even a whisper. Silence hung in the air so heavy it was suffocating. The judge blinked, stunned. The HOA men paled. Callahan's smirk fell off his face like shattered glass. And suddenly, the entire balance of the room shifted, because now, the woman they had mocked wasn't just Maya. She was Maya Johnson, Director of Regional Homeland Security. A woman whose career was built on uncovering lies, dismantling corruption, and standing firm in the face of intimidation. The silence broke when the judge cleared his throat. "Proceed." Maya turned back to her folder, calm as ever. "Yes, Your Honor, let's proceed." The HOA men didn't laugh. Anymore, what happened in that moment wasn't just a revelation of her title. It was a lesson, one that every homeowner in that courtroom, every viewer of this story, needs to understand. Don't let intimidation silence you. HOAs often rely on fear, piling on fines, sending threatening letters, or mocking homeowners into submission. But fear only works if you accept it. Know the rules better than they do. When you read your IS bylaws and compare their actions against their own rules, you'll often find contradictions. Use that against them, just like Maya did. Demand fairness. If they enforce a rule against you, make sure they enforce it against everyone. Document, photograph, record, facts. Speak louder than intimidation. Maya knew all of this. She had done her homework, and now the HOA men were scrambling. Callahan tried to recover. He leaned forward, his voice shaky. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. Her position outside this courtroom doesn't change her violations," but the judge cut him off. "It does change something. It tells me she's credible. And it tells me that this HOA may very well be abusing its power." The men sank lower into their seats. Maya didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at them, her gaze steady, and said quietly, "Power is not for abuse. It's for responsibility. And you failed that responsibility." The weight of her words lingered in the room, pressing down on everyone present, and as the tension thickened, the viewers watching this story unfold know this truth. It's not about having a title. It's about standing firm, prepared, unshaken when others try to tear you down. Asterisk, if this story moved you, don't just walk away. Stand tall against intimidation, just like Maya. If you've ever faced an HOA or any group trying to silence your voice, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. And if you want to see how this courtroom battle ends, watch until the very end. Subscribe now, turn on the bell, because the most shocking moment is still to come. The silence after Maya's words felt eternal. Her revelation had cracked the arrogance of the HOA men like glass under a hammer. The courtroom that once echoed with their laughter now carried only the weight of their fear. Mr. Callahan, who had strutted into the room certain of victory, sat frozen. His fingers tapped nervously against the polished wood of the table, but his smirk was gone. His allies, who had once leaned close to whisper jokes, now stared at the floor. The judge adjusted his glasses and leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Director Johnson," he said carefully, "your position is significant. But as you know, this court weighs facts, not titles. Please continue with your defense." Maya gave a small nod. She hadn't revealed her title to boast. She had revealed it to cut through the doubt, to silence the mockery, to remind the HOA men that she wasn't someone they could bully. She opened her folder again, her hands steady. "Of course, Your Honor. Let's look at the facts." She laid out each piece, slow and deliberate. Photographs of other houses with the same mailbox paint. Screenshots of bylaws requiring written warnings. Documentation of selective enforcement, one by one. She laid their hypocrisy bare. The judge flipped through the pages, his face tightening as he read. "Mr. Callahan," he said at last, "I see here multiple inconsistencies. Can you explain why these other homeowners were not fined for the same issues?" Callahan stammered. His voice, once so confident, now cracked. We enforce rules as best we can, Your Honor. Some things slip through. It's not intentional." Maya's gaze cut across the room. "Not intentional? I've received over a dozen notices in 6 months. And yet the house directly across from me, with the exact same mailbox, has received none. The only difference, Mr. Callahan, is that I refuse to donate to your so-called neighborhood improvement fund. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Heads turned. The judge's eyes narrowed. Is that true? Callahan's face flushed red. That fund was voluntary. Maya didn't flinch. Voluntary. With threats attached. Pay or suddenly your grass is too long. Pay. Or suddenly your mailbox is the wrong color. Pay. Or suddenly you're in court. That's not voluntary. That's extortion. The word hung in the air like a THUNDERCLAP. The HOA men shifted in their seats. Their carefully built facade crumbling into dust. The judge's gavel came down hard. Order, order in the court. When the room quieted, Maya continued, her voice calm but unyielding. This case isn't just about me. It's about every homeowner who's been silenced because they couldn't afford a lawyer, who caved because they didn't know their rights, who paid fines they never should have paid. This is about fairness. The judge nodded slowly. I see. And do you have proof of this fund's connection to the HOA board? Maya pulled out another document. Emails, Your Honor. Board communications pressuring residents to contribute. I filed them with my initial response to the court. The judge took the papers, his face hardening as he scanned them. Callahan looked as though the ground had opened beneath him. For a long moment, the courtroom was silent, except for the shuffle of papers. Then the judge leaned forward, his voice low but firm. Mr. Callahan, this court takes accusations of selective enforcement and financial coercion very seriously. Very seriously. Callahan's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. His allies looked away, unwilling to meet the judge's eyes. Maya stepped back, her folder closed. She had said enough. Now it was the judge's turn. The gavel came down again. This court finds that the HOA acted with bias, selectively enforced its rules, and abused its authority. The fines against Ms. Johnson are dismissed. Furthermore, I am ordering an investigation into the practices of this HOA board. The room erupted, some gasped. Some whispered, some smiled quietly at the vindication they'd just witnessed. But the HOA men sat motionless, their empire of intimidation collapsing around them. Maya didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply took a deep breath and gathered her things. Her fight wasn't about victory for herself. It was about principle. About justice. She walked out of the courtroom with her head high. Outside, the air felt lighter. Neighbors who had come to watch hurried to her side. One woman clutched her hand. You don't know what you've done for us. We've all been scared of them for years. Maya gave her a gentle nod. Fear is what they count on. But fear breaks the moment someone stands up. Another man stepped forward. How did you do it? They come after me for everything. My garbage cans, my paint, even the number of guests I have over. What's the secret? Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. The secret is knowledge, she said. Read the bylaws. Learn them better than the board. Document everything. Every notice, every picture, every inconsistency. And never walk into a courtroom afraid. Walk in prepared. The man nodded, his eyes burning with a mix of shame and hope. I've been paying them just to keep them quiet. Maya put a hand on his shoulder. That's what they want. But silence only feeds them. If they're wrong, challenge them. If they're unfair, expose them. They can't stand against truth. The small crowd that had gathered listened in silence. For them, this wasn't just a legal win. It was permission. Permission to fight back, to stop bowing their heads, to stop living in fear of a few men drunk on authority. Maya glanced back at the courthouse doors. She knew the battle wasn't over. The HOA would scramble, try to cover their tracks, maybe even retaliate. But she wasn't afraid. She had faced them head on. She had stood in the spotlight of judgment and turned their power against them. And now, the homeowners had seen what was possible. Later that evening, Maya sat at her kitchen table, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the room. The folder of documents lay in front of her. No longer a burden, but a symbol of strength. Her phone buzzed with messages, neighbors thanking her, strangers sharing their own HOA nightmares, colleagues congratulating her. But one message stood out. It was from a man she barely knew, a quiet homeowner down the street who had always kept to himself. It read, "I watched you today. I've been afraid of them for years, but you gave me courage. Thank you." Maya closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. Courage, that was the real victory. Not just dismissed fines, not just exposed corruption, but the spark she had lit in others. She thought back to the laughter in the courtroom, the smug faces that had once looked down on her. They had believed they were untouchable. They had believed she was powerless. And yet, with nothing but truth, preparation, and resolve, she had turned their laughter into silence. The lesson was clear, and it wasn't just for her neighbors. It was for anyone who had ever been mocked, silenced, or intimidated. Power doesn't come from titles. It doesn't come from fear. It comes from standing tall when everyone expects you to bow. That was the story she wanted people to carry with them. Not that she was Director of Homeland Security. Not that she had won against the HOA, but that no one is too small to stand up. No one is too powerless to fight back. As night fell outside her window, Maya leaned back in her chair and whispered to herself, "They thought they could break me, but they only made me stronger." And somewhere across the neighborhood, in houses where fear had once ruled, lights glowed a little brighter. Neighbors stood a little taller, and silence, the silence of submission, began to crack. The battle against the HOA was far from over. But a war of voices had just begun, and this time, the people weren't afraid.